first one this morning was incredible and looked at toxic workplaces and culture. And I'm delighted that my second one is more about how to make your career last, but how to be happy doing it. How to think about, does the role suit who you are, what you want to become? And the first session, and I'm delighted to have the brilliant Owen Hancock from Impact.com joining me for this. Woo! This is the art of self-empathy, how it can help heal, validate, and just make you a better and healthier person. It's a small task, Owen. We're going to get right in there with this. Tell me, first of all, what is self-empathy?
I guess self-empathy is different things to different people. And it's important for me to say I'm not an expert in self-empathy. I am a person on a journey to discover more about it. But to me, it is about removing the judgment that you apply to yourself, right? So it's about being patient, being kind, and being supportive to yourself in the same way that you would to a friend or a colleague. So how do you treat yourself with that same understanding that you would do someone else?
I think it's something there's never been a more important time to take time for yourself. We talked this morning in the wellness stage with Kay Mundy from Google about burnout and putting the fire out on burnout. And I think that's one thing that there's a lot of external stressors pressurizing everybody right now. So it's important to look at how you balance your own mental health with the demands of the workload. So I'm going to ask you, Owen, how do you do that?
I guess what I would say is it's not a seesaw, right? It's not you have to do certain things for your mental health and certain things for your work productivity. I think mental health is a precursor to being more effective in the actual workplace, right? So the things that I do to promote my own mental well-being help me reflect better on the work that I'm trying to do. So if I think about the stuff that I do, it allows me to step back and then to think, right, what is important for me to do? How do I evaluate what's going to really make a difference for me in terms of my company and what I'm trying to achieve? And how do I eliminate what is perhaps some of the busy work or some of the fear-based work, that is, I'm doing it myself because I'm worried about what people will think of me rather than because I think it will actually add value. So taking that step back, allowing yourself time to reflect, allows you to be more productive in turn. But I also do recognise that it's hard to do, right? It's hard to say, right, I'm going to make time to be self-reflective. And so for me, it's about setting realistic expectations with my own time and doing small things. So I try and do it in 5-minute chunks, because I know that in any day I can find 5 minutes. That's always possible for me. So I do things like journaling, or I try and meditate for a lot longer, but I'll say 5-minute minimum, because then I know that I'm doing it and there's no excuse. And so that allows me that balance, which in turn allows me to more effectively do my job.
Because that's the thing. I mean, we all recognise unfortunately, you can't take away workload. You can't take away work pressure. You raised an interesting point then that it's often fear. And that came up this morning, that the biggest impact on burnout comes from fear. And I think that it's managing that and acknowledging when you go from that comfort zone to the learn zone. The danger zone is often when we're fearing either the sheer workload. If we can't impact the workload, is it just that? Do you think it's enough that it's just that 5 minutes of time? Or is there anything else that can help?
I think you can impact the workload. And maybe that's just the company that I work at allows me a lot of freedom in that sense. But I think it's important that you take personal ownership of what you do and what you're willing to work on. Because no one is going to go to you and say, Julia, you're doing too much, do less. You have to work it out yourself and say, right, I know what... Take that step back, say, I know what is going to create the most value out of it. And there's nothing, from my perspective, there's nothing worse than promising to do something and not doing it. Be realistic about what you can achieve, and then and that is better for the company as well as for you.
I think that's so true. And I know I'm going to go into a very personal topic to you now, because I think I've seen you changed because of something that was life-changing to you. And a couple of years ago, Owen sadly suffered from a brain tumour, and he's very kindly been willing to be open and honest and talk today about that and talk about how you've adjusted your way of life. Tell us more.
I guess it was it's kind of the start of my self-empathy journey. In a proactive sense, right? Because I hadn't really engaged with it that much, but I found myself having to be a lot more patient with myself, because there were things that I could do, which, especially after the surgery, when I was physically and mentally depleted, I couldn't do, and that was really difficult for me to come to terms with. The sort of like physically, I can't walk around, but I could see progress on that. But mentally, where my brain tumor is in the speech and language section of my brain. And so, particularly after the surgery, I lost a lot of my use of language. And so there were words that I was striving for and I couldn't find them. And I'm sure you can tell from the way that we've spoken, I rely quite heavily on my language. And so I had to be really patient in that moment in time, and it gradually came back. But it reminded me that no one expects more of me than I do of myself, and it's important to remember that no one's putting pressure on me saying get better quicker. I'm just doing that to myself because it's my own frustrations. But it also it forced me to change my outlook, to be more patient with myself, and then to proactively go out and get help, and to recognize that it's not a weakness to say I can't do it, it's a strength. And that's important. So I started doing things like going to therapy, which has been a big help for me as well. But I would never have done that if it wasn't for such a big traumatic event in the first place. But I guess what I'm saying is I'm grateful for that in some respects, because it's pushed me to a new place.
I think it's amazing, and I'm very, very, as I said, very grateful for Owen talking about this openly today, because that had a huge impact on you. And all credit, I've known Owen a long time, and I've seen him absolutely persevere and have that patience and understanding. And I'm so proud as well that you're able now to give this advice of saying, whether it's a life-changing thing that's happened to you or not, take time for self-empathy. Be kind to yourself. Are there any other areas within that that's of practicing self-empathy? Sorry, Owen.
What I would just add to that as well is mine was very immediate. It was one seismic event. But everyone that I speak to about it has got their own stories and their own trauma and everything else that they're dealing with. And so it's not that, great that I had one inflection point, but everyone else needs to reflect on what they're struggling with and what they're battling with, because those are all valid problems for everyone to have. And take that opportunity to be kind to yourself.
And when you say about being kind to yourself, and you mentioned the journaling and the meditation, are there any other little techniques in small doses that you can use to practice self-empathy?
So those are I guess the two that I use most, and I do longer forms of those are great if you have the time for them. But there are a couple of different other things that we use. So, for example, I've always been keen on exercise. I used to rock climb a lot before my brain tumor meant that I couldn't do that. And so things like that, where you're focused on that one mindful thing, super valuable. But there's nothing, I think, that's more valuable than the meditating, than going into observer mode, that allows you to separate yourself, what you're feeling, from the emotions that you are, and to say, right, I am not those emotions. They're one part of me, but they don't define me. And that's, for me at least, was a really valuable step on my journey.
And let me ask this, because I always try and bring this back to businesses and companies and how it impacts. We are all here in a working environment. Have you seen a way in which self-empathy actually helps improve, for example, client relationships?
Yeah, I do think that. For one part, I would refer back to it, setting the right expectations. If you're kind to yourself, you're accurate about what you can deliver. And so, therefore, you're always going to have better better client relationships because you're doing what you say you're going to do rather than over-promising and under-delivering. But I think it's very easy with client relationships to get very stuck in the idea of, well, the client wants this and so I've got to do it, rather than being realistic, because I think it's easy as well to forget that the clients are individuals as well, right?
They're human. They're human, yeah.
And you might not see that if you're a client-facing individual, but you'll be surprised at how empathetic those clients are and can be, and how understanding they are, especially if you share and if you're open about some of what you're going through.
So you mentioned about clients being human, and we hope that company owners are also being a bit more human.
Absolutely.
Because I'm always interested in what you think, Owen, of how much the job affects burnout, and at what points do you push back on the workload?
Look, I mean, burnout is a serious thing, and it happens a lot, and I think it's also happening more now because of the change in working environment, where because people are working from home more and more, it's harder to have that division between work and personal life. But I do think that there are valuable things that companies can do to prevent that. And Impact.com is very strong on saying, right, you agency over your own workload, and that there's a level of self-ownership of saying, right, this is what I'm going to do, and I can't do more than that, and I will do it in the time. Like Impact has unlimited annual leave, for example, because there's a level of trust in those employees to get their job done in the right time that it takes them to get their job done, and to say, like, it's important that you say, if that isn't going to be enough time for you to do it, you need to say that yourself.
So the message there, be more impact.com for a start. Final question from me before I ask the audience if they've got any questions for Owen, which is really a takeaway. If people are struggling with the idea of self-empathy, self-care, what should be in their toolkit?
So recognize that it is like a valuable thing to have self-empathy. That's the starting point, right? Like, it's not, like we were discussing earlier, it's not a balancing act or a seesaw. It is a precursor to help you do things better in your work life as well as in your personal life. But within that toolkit, I use an app called Headspace. I don't know if anyone else does.
That. Does anyone else use Headspace? We have some believers. Lovely.
But it's also, it's super manageable, like I was talking about earlier. Like, yes, you can aspire to do long form sessions, but it's also like you can set it to 5 minutes or 10 minutes to make sure that you actually just get something done. It also really helps me. I don't know, I have a feeling you might have an overactive mind like me, and so I don't know if anyone else in the audience shares this, but I really struggle to get to sleep at night.
Yeah, I go to sleep with the Calm app on the different Stephen Fry's lullabies and stuff like that. And then I listen to it all night. I have a sleep hub going. I have all these noises just to try and quiet the insanity in my brain. So yeah. I'm a big believer.
Do you use the so Headspace has got like a load of different sleep stuff. So some of it is about acknowledging the importance and what your motivation is for sleep. Some of it is about physical wind down. Some of it's about emotional wind downs as well. And so doing one of those before going into a sleep podcast and stuff like that, that's also really useful for me.
I love that. And even right now, just before I come to you for questions, I'm not very good at breathing, but I do think it is important. Just take a minute in this lovely, relaxing space. Take a breath in and take a breath out. Brilliant. Wonderful. That was me. I feel now relaxed. Right, I'm going to come to you, audience. Have we got any questions for Owen? And I'll come to you with a mic. I've got one. Casey, here's your question for Owen.
Hello, Owen. How did you reapproach coming back to work and sort of re-entering like a new kind of reality for yourself?
That's a really good question. Thank you. So Impact.com was really, really good with me. I would put a lot of that down to my line managers, both my direct line manager and my dotted line manager. So I did a phased return to work. It was really difficult for me to try and like dip one toe in and be like limit myself to starting with half, like I did 1 half day a week, and then I did 1 full day a week, and then I did 2 full days a week. And so I'm sure everyone can imagine, when you start working again, it's very difficult to say, oh, I'm going to do a little bit and then not do all of these things, because you can see all of the challenges that I had a team that were facing, and so I wish I was there to support them for that. But I had to be very disciplined with myself to recognize that I wasn't supporting my team by just barreling headfirst back into it. I had to be doing that in a phased sense to allow myself to ease back into it. And that took maybe 2 or 3 months. And it was quite a long and, for me personally, challenging period of time. But I had a lot of support around me in a genuine sense of making me feel that it was okay to take that time. And I didn't have pressure from my work, which I've worked in companies in the past which I don't think would have had that same mature approach. And long-term approach as well. It's important to say that. Like, all of this is saying, it's not just how do you get the best out of today, it's how do you get the best out of yourself, and how does the business get the best out of you over the course of several years. So
amazing, thank you. Now, Owen is going to be available. He's around in the Impact.com Prosecco Lounge today if anyone has any more questions. But a huge thank you to Owen Hancock, Impact.com, for being so open and honest. Thank you very much, Owen.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, everyone. Okay.